Hello and welcome to another episode of Deep Dive brought to you by NewsX. My name is Vineet Malhotra and the Economic Survey of India is the government's most detailed assessment of the country's economic health, tabled in the Parliament ahead of the Union budget to lay out both achievements and risks. It examines growth, inflation, jobs, investment and social outcomes while also offering a forward-looking roadmap. This year's survey projects India's real GDP growth in the range of 6 to 6.5%, positioning the country among the fastest growing major economies globally. The survey credits this resilience to a strong domestic demand, improved macroeconomic management and sustained public investment, even as global growth remains weak. Trade has slowed and geopolitical tensions are at a zenith. And at the same time, it cautions that India is entering a more challenging phase where growth must increasingly be driven by productivity gains, private investment and employment creation rather than government spending alone. In assessing the overall state of the economy, the survey highlights macroeconomic stability as a key anchor. Inflation has moderated compared to previous years, fiscal consolidation is on track and external vulnerability is being managed through adequate foreign exchange reserves. The survey notes that consumption demand, especially in urban areas, has remained robust, while rural demand has shown a gradual improvement. However, it also flags uneven growth across sectors and regions, warning that sustaining high growth over the medium term will require structural reforms rather than short-term stimulus. The chapter on monetary and financial sector developments presents one of the most optimistic assessments in recent years. India's banking system is described as being in a position of strength, with non-performing assets at multi-year lows, improved capital adequacy and healthier balance sheets. Credit growth has accelerated across key sectors, including housing, infrastructure, MSMEs and services, reflecting both stronger lender confidence and rising borrower demand. The survey supports the Reserve Bank of India's calibrated policy approach, arguing that maintaining price stability is essential for durable growth. It also underscores the importance of deepening financial markets, expanding access to formal credit, and ensuring that financialization continues to support productive investments rather than speculative activity. On prices and inflation, the survey provides a nuanced assessment. While headline inflation has eased and core inflation remains largely under control, food inflation continues to pose challenges due to supply-side disruptions, climate variability and structural inefficiencies. Agriculture markets as well. The survey stresses that monetary policy alone cannot address food price volatility and calls for coordinated supply-side interventions such as better storage infrastructure, improved logistics, crop diversification and more efficient food distribution systems. Inflation management, the survey argues, must balance short-term price stability with long-term growth considerations. The external sector chapter examines India's engagement with the global economy amid rising uncertainty. The survey notes that while global trade has slowed and merchandise exports face headwinds, India's services exports have emerged as a major strength, placing the country amongst the world's leading service exporters. Foreign direct investment inflows remain stable, but the survey makes a strong case for shifting focus from headline inflow numbers to the quality and composition of FDI. Investments that bring technology transfer, integrate India into global value chains, and generate employment are prioritized over short-term or speculative flows. At the same time, the survey highlights risks from a global financial tightening, currency volatility and geopolitical fragmentation, all of which could impact capital inflows and trade. Looking ahead, the survey's medium-term outlook places deregulation at the center of India's growth strategy. It argues that excessive regulation, complex compliance requirements and policy uncertainty continue to weigh on productivity and entrepreneurship, particularly for MSMEs. The survey calls for a systemic review of regulations at both the central and state levels, advocating a shift towards trust-based governance, simplified rules, and reduce administrative burdens. And according to the survey, deregulation can unlock significant growth potential by lowering costs, encouraging investment, and enabling firms to scale up more easily. Investment in infrastructure received detailed attention, with the survey highlighting the critical role of public capital expenditure in sustaining growth in recent years. Government spending on roads, railways, ports, logistics, and digital infrastructure has strengthened economic capacity and supported demand during periods of private sector hesitation. Initiatives such as the National Infrastructure Pipeline and asset monetization programs are cited as key enablers. However, the survey is clear that long-term growth cannot rely solely on public investment, and that a revival of private sector capex is essential to sustain momentum and generate employment at scale. In its assessment of industry, the survey notes that manufacturing activity has shown signs of recovery, supported by policy initiatives, infrastructure expansion, and improved access to credit. However, growth remains uneven, particularly among smaller firms. MSMEs are identified as a critical link between industrial growth and employment, with the survey emphasizing the need for easier credit access, faster clearances, better technology and its adoption, and deeper integration into domestic and global supply chains. Industrial growth, the survey stresses, must translate into productivity gains and job creation rather than remain limited to a few capital-intensive sectors. The services sector continues to be described as India's primary growth engine, accounting for the largest share of GDP and employment. Sectors such as information technology, financial services, tourism, transport, and communications have driven growth and exports. The survey acknowledges emerging challenges, including global tech slowdowns and increasing automation, but maintains that services will remain central to India's economic trajectory, provided there is continuous skill upgradation and innovation. Agriculture and food management are examined through the lens of both livelihoods and long-term sustainability. While agriculture's share in GDP has declined, it continues to support a significant portion of the population. The survey also noted that stable agricultural growth and a gradual shift towards higher value activities such as horticulture, dairy, fisheries, and allied sectors, government intervention through income support, procurement, and food security programs are highlighted, but climate change is identified as the single biggest threat to agriculture stability, necessitating investment in resilient practices, irrigation, and technology. The chapter on climate change and environment underscores the growth integration of sustainability into economic planning. The survey highlights India's progress in expanding renewable energy capacity, improving energy efficiency, and promoting climate adaptation and its measures. Initiatives such as the Life Movement aim to encourage sustainable consumption patterns, while the survey argues that climate resilience must be built into infrastructure, agriculture, and urban planning to safeguard long-term growth. In the social sector, the survey points to expanded public spending on health, education, nutrition, and social protection. It notes improvements in poverty reduction, access to basic services, and efficiency gains achieved through digital delivery and direct benefit transfers. The survey argues that inclusive growth is not only a moral imperative, but also an economic necessity, as better health, education, and social security outcomes directly support productivity and labor force participation. Employment and skill development are presented as the most critical challenges facing the economy. While employment indicators have improved, the survey stresses concerns around job quality, informality, and skill mismatches. It calls for a stronger alignment between education, vocational training, and industry needs, along with expanded apprentices and on-the-job training programs. Job creation, the survey warns, must keep pace with economic growth to ensure social stability. And in a forward-looking chapter on labor in the age of artificial intelligence, the survey acknowledges that technological change will disrupt existing jobs while creating new opportunities. Routine and low-skill roles are most vulnerable, while demand for digital, analytical, and adaptive skills is expected to rise. The survey concludes that the true risk lies not in technology itself, but in the failure to prepare the workforce through timely reskilling and institutional reform. Overall, the economic survey presents a picture of an economy that is resilient and stable, but entering a decisive phase. Growth remains strong, inflation is moderating, banks are healthy, and public investment continues to support momentum. Yet the survey makes it clear that sustaining high growth will require deregulation, private investment, job creation, and large-scale skill development. The survey sets the strategic direction The union budget will determine how effectively that vision is translated into action. Dr. Jayajit Bhattacharya, President of the CDPR, joins us on the program to give his views on the economic survey and what it entails and what would the budget do in terms of picking notes from what the economic survey has suggested. Dr. Bhattacharya, thank you for taking out the time and speaking to us. Well, job creation, upskilling, and infusion of technology into day-to-day activity is very, very important. But at the same time, it is noteworthy that despite all these challenges, India is the fourth largest economy at this point in time. A GDP of 6 to 6.5% annually is a big deal.
No, absolutely. I think the economic survey is very, very encouraging. In fact, it's predicting that next year's growth rate will be above 7%. It will be somewhere around 7.2%. And that's very, very encouraging, because being the fourth largest GDP, growing at that pace is very, very encouraging for everybody. Now, if you look at the macro stability issues around inflation, buffers, and confidence, there's a lot of buffers that we have built up. The country went through a bunch of shocks. There were geopolitical issues, there were wars, there were trade issues, and still we have come out stronger out of all of these challenges. I mean, just one small example of the fact that we lost about $40 billion of exports to the US, and we actually came back growing faster in that quarter. And our total exports actually went up after we lost the market to market in the US. So that just shows the strength of the economy, the buffers, and some of this strength is coming from the fact that even our taxes are going up. The tax collection, in fact, has gone up to about 9.4% of the GDP, which is quite significant, and that is what provides the ability for the government to start investing into some of the aspects that you just spoke about, including capital expenditure. We have had a record spend on capital expenditure. It has gone up by over 4 times since 2018, and that expenditure is going into, as you had mentioned, into the roads, the highways, the digital infrastructure, which is having a virtuous cycle, because with better infrastructure, the industry is able to grow faster. They're getting more efficient. They're able to produce goods cheaper, and also the fact that this particular economic survey puts all the three economies in perspective, which is the primary economy, the secondary economy, and the tertiary. It's not just saying that let's focus on agriculture. It's saying agriculture is tremendously important, but so is manufacturing and so is services. And we need to grow all three of them on an equal footing. And I think that's a significant departure from earlier, where the focus would be either manufacturing or the focus would be on getting the agriculture up and running. It's now clear that we cannot be ignoring any of these three industry segments, which is agriculture being primary industry, manufacturing secondary, and services being tertiary, which also brings in another aspect of the narration that has been going on, that India should focus on certain areas and ignore certain areas, or leave those areas to other economies. Given the size of the economy and given the talent and resources that the economy has, we cannot leave any segment out. And that's one of the key messages coming in from the economic survey.
You're absolutely right. Appreciate you taking out the time and speaking with us, Dr. Bhattacharya. We'll wait for the budget to come out and, of course, compare these notes. We'll be right back.